Welcome to the True Crime Stories channel. Today we'll look at the chilling case of Scott Kologi. On what should have been a night of joy and happiness for the Kologi family in Long Branch, New Jersey, darkness descended. As the clock neared the end of 2017, they, like many others, gathered to ring in the new year. However, before the celebrations could begin, their world was shattered. Scott Kologi, a teenage boy, stood accused of committing an unthinkable crime against his own family, leaving us with haunting questions about what drives a young mind to such extremes. Before we discuss what happened that night, who Scott is, and why he did what he did, let's first get to know about his family. The Kologi family was popular and well-established in Long Branch, a beachside city with a population of around 32,000 people. Thanks to its location on the Jersey Shore and close proximity to the ocean, it's widely known as a popular destination for fun, relaxation, and recreation. The Kologi family had lived in the area for a long time, and they were widely recognized and active in their communities. They frequented the same places, like the local convenience stores, nearly every day for scratchers and six-packs. They were familiar faces, the kind of locals you'd call usuals, because they stuck to their favorite spots. This family was the go-to for barbecues and the type of home where kids brought all their friends. It was the hangout spot where they could munch on snacks and watch TV. Their roots in Long Branch ran deep, with generations attending the same high school, creating a legacy over decades. Their impact was so profound that even after most of the kids had graduated, the school superintendent released a statement after the tragic event, expressing condolences and offering support to the community during the challenging time. Stephen Kologi Sr. was born in 1971. He grew up in Long Branch and spent most, if not all, of his life there. He was known as a fantastic guy, described as a charismatic man who easily won the favor of everyone he met. Rarely did he have a disagreement with anyone. His interests included bodybuilding, skiing, swimming, and softball. He was also hailed as a great father. He had a special bond with his kids, whom he shared with his wife, Linda. He was the kind of father who would go to great lengths for his children, creating a loving family environment. Stephen met Linda a few years after finishing school. He was captivated by her cheerful laughter and kind eyes. Linda was born in 1973 and grew up in foster homes, but her beautiful smile remained untouched by the system. She had a little boy named Jonathan from a previous relationship, and Stephen quickly became friends with him. They got married in 1997. Linda was known as a woman whose life revolved around her family, particularly as a devoted mother. Linda and Steve had been together for quite a while and faced financial challenges. There were reports of past financial troubles, including a bankruptcy several years ago, and more recently, they were at risk of losing their home to foreclosure. Despite these difficulties, they remained positive and did everything possible to ensure their kids never lacked anything. Steve was described as the kind of guy who would go to any lengths for his family and took up odd jobs, sometimes working overnight shifts, from midnight until 9 in the morning, just to make sure his family had enough money and his kids never had to go without anything. Steve and Linda were the parents of 3 sons. The eldest, Jonathan Ruiz, was Linda's son from a previous relationship and was fortunately not present at home during the tragic events. Their second son, Stephen Kologi Jr., was named after his father, and the third son, Scott Kologi, was, sadly, the one who committed the murders. He was born with a brain tumor, and the difficulties during birth led to some underlying medical conditions for him. They also had a daughter, Brittany Kologi. She was a cheerful and humorous girl. Brittany always had a smile on her face and was enjoyable to be around. She had graduated from Long Branch High School a year before the tragic incident and had started attending Stockton University. Her plan was to study health sciences, and while there, she built close connections with her peers and easily made friends. Brittany held a special bond with her grandfather Adrian, who lived only 15 minutes away from the Kologi home where the tragic events occurred. Adrian was present often and was closely connected with the family. During warm Sundays, the Kologi family, including Stephen Sr. and the kids, along with Grandpa Adrian, would gather at a local softball field to play together with friends. Grandpa Adrian was in a relationship with Mary Schultz, a 70-year-old woman described as his lifelong companion and soulmate. Mary was a fun-loving woman and the nurturer of a younger generation. She was a cheerleader who encouraged youth to pursue their dreams. Born on September 1st, 2001, Scott Kologi was a unique boy. Many of his thinking and learning abilities seemed different from those of other people. When he was 9, his parents decided to take him out of Long Branch High School because of academic and social difficulties. Instead, they homeschooled him until the 7th grade, and then enrolled him in a school for children with special needs. This change helped Scott succeed in math and finally learn to read. Scott was diagnosed with autism and early signs of schizophrenia when he was just 16. His family, especially his mom Linda, stood by him with constant support. He didn't have any friends and was often bullied because he was different and severely misunderstood. In certain aspects, he displayed normal teenage desires, such as wanting a girlfriend and aspiring to attend college or join the military. However, Scott differed from his peers in other aspects. He enjoyed watching SpongeBob SquarePants, playing with his toys, and had a habit of sleeping in his parents' bed. He also still held a belief in Santa Claus. Despite his challenges, Scott would join family gatherings with a very happy attitude. The neighbors and friends, unaware of the hidden problems, saw a tight-knit family involved in each other's lives. However, what neighbors didn't know was that Scott was struggling with mental health issues, a secret only known to his immediate family. Scott's battle with mental health went beyond what people could see. Although he looked cheerful during family activities, his mix of autism and early schizophrenia weighed heavily on him. Behind closed doors, he opened up to his mother Linda, expressing the need for therapy. Unfortunately, Linda hesitated to seek professional help due to the fear that authorities might take her son away. The stigma surrounding mental health often prevented families from openly addressing the difficulties they were going through. Moreover, bouncing around from foster care had instilled in Linda a fear of institutionalization. Each time Scott tried to discuss his feelings with his mother, it would result in Linda hushing him up. She would tell him he would be locked up in the loony bin, and doctors would put him on medication if he talked about his bad thoughts. Scott complained that the thoughts were coming more often. He thought the medication could help him. Even though he didn't want to hurt anybody, he said someday he might have to. Linda, however, was clearly struggling with her own issues. She kept it all bottled up and never let anyone know how troubled she was. Her only outlet was her Twitter feed. Whenever she was upset, she would listen to Foo Fighters and felt like David Grohl's music was giving her the strength and push she needed to go on in life. And yet, she expressed she would end her life if that meant her family could use her insurance money. She would do anything for them. Though Linda never sought professional help, it is apparent that she suffered from severe depression. The financial crunch had stressed her immensely, and she had a hard time dealing with all the pressure. She had a lot on her plate and she seemed on edge, especially since the foreclosure notice. Like every mother, she thought her son was harmless. But Scott said the strangest things. "I would have to kill you, Mom. Then I'd have to kill Dad because he would be sad without you." He also mentioned that he hated his sister Brittany, and he wanted to kill her. Linda's sister, Michelle Molyneux, who stayed in the family's basement apartment that she and her husband Richard rented for $500 a month, also heard Scott saying troubling things about possibly harming family members. The scary threat happened during a family board game. Scott Kologi was super excited to play Clue, a gift his mom got him in October 2017. The 16-year-old got his Aunt Michelle and Uncle Rich from the basement and started setting up the murder mystery board. Scott emptied the little toy weapons onto the game board. Then, holding the miniature revolver between his thumb and forefinger, he pointed it at his aunt. "I'm going to kill you," he said to Michelle. Next, he aimed the toy gun at his uncle. "And then, after I come downstairs, I'll take out Mom and Dad and kill you," Scott explained to Rich Molyneux. These remarks might have seemed like a dark joke from a kid trying to be funny, but sometimes Scott had thoughts about violence that he didn't like. Thoughts that frightened him. Michelle had heard her nephew talk about harming his family, even killing them. She noticed how serious Scott's words were and told her sister to get help. In response, Linda, driven by fear and denial, threatened to kick Michelle out of their home if she shared their family secret. She also said that Michelle would never see Linda's children again. Even Scott's grandpa, Adrian, pleaded with Linda and Stephen to address Scott's concerning statements about killing people. Scott really loved his grandfather and confided in him. Adrian understood the boy's struggles, as he himself had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. His grandson told him about all the violent thoughts he had. It all began when people started bullying him. He had exceedingly vivid hallucinations. Dealing with his mental health was very hard, especially without professionals. Unfortunately, when Scott's parents confronted him, he got mad at Adrian for ratting him out. Despite these red flags, Linda continued to shield the family's struggles from the outside world, believing that acknowledgement would lead to separation from her son. In October 2016, Stephen Jr. bought the AK-style Century Arms C39 V2 from a gun dealer in Ocean County. Stephen stored it in his bedroom closet, along with around 1,000 rounds of ammunition and 2 empty 15-round magazines. When Stephen's mom discovered the rifle, she advised him to get a safe for it. However, using the safe caused the gun to rust, so Stephen Jr. decided to keep it in its case in his closet. In New Jersey, it's considered a disorderly person offense if a child accesses an unsecured gun. However, the law defines a minor as under 16, and Scott was not that age. Scott's comments about killing his family members, combined with the presence of a gun in the house, frightened Linda's sister so much that she suggested to her husband that they move out of the basement apartment. But he wasn't worried. On New Year's Eve, members of the Kologi family started gathering at Linda and Stephen Sr.'s home in the early afternoon of December 31st, 2017. The small, cluttered house was still decked out for Christmas. Ruiz, Scott's half-brother who lived in Toms River and ran a wireless technology business, dropped by in the afternoon but left around 4 p.m. After the family watched Kong Skull Island, Scott headed upstairs to the bedroom he shared occasionally with Stephen Jr. to do some schoolwork. That's when troubling thoughts returned. He grabbed the AK-style rifle, perched on its case in the closet, and loaded both 15-round magazines, one bullet at a time. Wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses mimicking the Terminator, he put in earplugs and turned off the room's light, anticipating his mother fetching him to watch the ball drop on TV at midnight. When she came, Scott shot her multiple times in the chest. Downstairs, family members heard the gunshots, questioning if they were fireworks or party poppers. Stephen Sr. rushed upstairs after his wife. Scott shot him in the back, causing him to fall back down the stairs. Michelle and Richard Molyneux fled to the basement and out the back door. Stephen Jr. ran out the front door and called 911. Seeing his youngest brother coming down the steps with the rifle at his side, he witnessed Scott shoot Mary, the woman he saw as his grandmother. Then, at point-blank range, Scott shot his sister Brittany several times while she sat at the table. Stephen Jr.'s girlfriend, who was present at the family house, also hid behind the nearby refrigerator, calling 911. With Mary Schultz on the ground, Adrian fell to his knees. He thought he was next and pleaded with Scott to stop. Surprisingly, his grandson lowered the rifle. The expression on his grandfather's face seemed to break the grip the violent thoughts had had over Scott for at least a year. Scott then turned, went back upstairs, dropped the gun, and waited for the police. Mary died in Adrian's arms, and he went over to Brittany, then called for help. Soon, police lights illuminated Scott's bedroom through the window. The family dog came to sit next to him, and the newly orphaned teenager petted his head. At 2:38 a.m. on New Year's Day 2018, Scott Kologi made his confession. The teenager provided a detached, almost casual play-by-play of the shooting. Stephen Jr. sat beside him, serving as Scott's guardian so police could question him. Even though it felt like I wasn't doing this physically, I was still able to see everything. And I would, see them move, and, I just kept firing until, they stopped moving, Scott explained, showing the way he held the rifle at his side to shoot. Aimed at the head and whatnot. Stephen Jr., who still had hope that his loved ones survived, tried to keep his composure. His mouth, his eyebrows, even his bobbing Adam's apple, betrayed the shock and horror washing over him as he listened. Minutes later, during a bathroom break for Scott, a detective told him she couldn't confirm if his parents, sister, and grandmother were dead, but he seemed to know. When she went out and left him by himself, Stephen Jr. put his hands on his face and started crying. While sitting through the interviews, Stephen had a hard time staying objective with his brother. He knew Scott was mentally handicapped, yet he wanted to leave him. Part of him wanted him in jail. When he was leaving, Scott gave him a hug. When Scott was alone with the officers, he finally realized what he had done. He broke down in tears and said, "I have hurt a lot of people." He told police he was thinking about killing his family throughout the day, but later said the idea rose within him only that afternoon. While he was busy with his school project, his mind got filled with bad moments, like things from years ago when he faced bullying. Scott confided to taking his brother's gun out multiple times in the past year. He also said he saw a video on YouTube that showed him how to use the semi-automatic. He had Googled if it would be useful against police officers with bulletproof vests. Police also found out he had been reading about the 2017 London terrorist attacks on his cell phone shortly before the killings. Out of the 14 shots he had fired, 12 had fatally hit his family members. Scott, an elbow propped on the table, explained that it felt like he was watching a movie, as if some other part of him had taken control. "It just felt like it wasn't me," he said. He knew what he did was wrong and he should feel sad, he said. But he just didn't feel anything. Almost 4.5 years after the terrible events of that New Year's Eve, the trial for Scott Kologi took place in February 2022. The legal process aimed to determine Scott's responsibility for the crimes, considering the complexities of mental illness. The defense argued that Scott's actions were influenced by insanity, making him not entirely responsible for the tragedy. They portrayed him as a young man struggling with mental health issues, suggesting that his actions were a result of a troubled mind. On the other hand, the prosecution strongly claimed that Scott was fully aware of what he was doing and knew it was wrong. In the courtroom, the prosecution argued that these were intentional and evil acts committed by someone fully aware of the consequences. In just 5 hours, the trial concluded with Scott Kologi being convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of a second-degree weapons charge. The judge sentenced him to 150 years in prison, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The sentence meant that Kologi would have to spend at least 127 years in prison before he would be eligible for parole. As we conclude this story, the Scott Kologi case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about mental health, access to firearms, and the profound impact of mental illness on individuals and their families. It asks us to consider the support systems we have in place and the signs we might be missing. If you have any thoughts or insights on this case, kindly share them in the comments below. If you found this story informative and valuable, please click the subscribe and like buttons. Thank you for watching.